Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am back with Bill Walko, who has kickstarted his third and final hero business storyline called The Final Reports or Final Reports.
The hero business. When your super image is in trouble, they're the ones to see. The hero business. With great power comes great marketability.
We scheduled this last week for this week. Turns out, looking at these numbers, I don't think you need me.
Well, every little bit helps. So, you're definitely helping to support independent artists and creators with every pledge, even beyond goal. So I encourage people to still check it out.
So I'm saying that because Bill has already met his goal, but there will be stretch goals for this. But let's talk first about the hero business. The last time we talked, you told us what it was all about, but really quickly, just tell us what it's all about again for people who didn't listen to that one.
Yeah, sure thing. So it's essentially about a marketing agency that caters to superheroes and their super egos, because everyone knows with great power comes great marketability. So it's a little bit of a superhero sitcom. If you're a fan of things like Futurama and Rick and Morty, it has a little bit of that vibe to it. So it definitely is like a comedy first and foremost. But for fans of the comic, as you well know, there's a lot of sort of intrigue and character development throughout the series. A lot of the co-workers are keeping secrets from each other, and they all kind of come out, and sort of mayhem happens, which is fun.
Just like in a regular sitcom, people have secrets and they all come out.
Exactly, yeah.
And of course, because with great power comes great marketability, you get situations like where if somebody isn't successful as a hero, they might try being a villain.
They might try being a villain. They might try auditioning new sidekicks. Sometimes their sidekicks get more popular than them, and that's a problem. Dying and coming back to life is, a problem for PR people to handle. So, sometimes if you're on the downswing, you got to team up with a more popular hero, and there's a lot of negotiation with that. And, who gets first billing on the cover when it's turned into a comic, all that kind of stuff.
How important. So very, very interestingly, you used to work in an ad agency, right?
Yes.
So
That's how it all came together.
You know how important marketing is.
For sure.
So I know that when I'm talking to people who do Kickstarters, they have a hard time with the marketing. It's not natural to a lot of people because a lot of people just want to make the comics. Is it easier for you, would you say, compared to other artists to do these Kickstarters?
That's a tough question. I think I have it so wired in me, all these like little marketing things that I've absorbed through osmosis and otherwise through the years. So I might have a little bit of a head start than, maybe some of the other artists. Some artists just like are not business people by nature. It's, two kind of different brain functions. So you don't always get, you can meet some extraordinary artists that are not great about marketing their own work. So sometimes that holds them back a little bit, unfortunately, because they're super talented and extraordinary artists. But I will say there's also people that I see, I'm always observing people that have tremendous hustle and always doing new things or trying new things. And I pick up stuff from other artists that are really good at that too. So I think a lot of people have it in them, even without any marketing experience.
So we're talking about marketing, so I just have to ask a little bit of a tangent. Stan Lee versus Jack Kirby, where do you stand on that whole thing?
Where do I stand in what regard, though?
Exactly, because I think a lot of people, when they debate this, they just talk about, putting pen to paper. And obviously, when you do that, then Kirby gets the brunt of it, right? But you got to sell this stuff too, and
yeah. Like
unfortunately, Kirby was not the best marketer.
Right. Marvel Comics would not be what Marvel Comics is without Stan Lee, because of the marketing, because of, he knew how to sell things. He knew how to get people excited about things. He created that sort of fun energy that there's a party going on and you want to be a part of it. So he was a great showman. He was like a P.T. Barnum of comics, and you got to give him that. So.
You know what Stan Lee never had, though, that until maybe a few years later, rockin' theme song
Theme song, yes. So everyone, if for no other reason, should go to my Kickstarter page and watch the video. And I hope you're entertained by it. I created my own theme song for my comic. So it's very much inspired by TV theme shows through the years. I really love the ones that explain the premise. I think they're super catchy. Everyone knows them to this day. They are earworms. So my goal was to create the earwormiest earworm that you could imagine.
Yes, and you absolutely succeeded. Who sang it?
Oh, there's a guy, Tim Song, who I partnered with, and he did the lyrics, and we kind of collaborated on the writing of it, but he did a lot of it. I gave him some examples of what I was going for, and he really did an amazing job with it.
What's your favorite theme song?
You mean like a TV theme song?
Yeah, TV theme song or cartoon theme song.
Hmm.
The main inspiration for this one, maybe.
Okay, I'll say Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo was probably a big inspiration. You totally get the vibe of the show from the theme song. Super memorable. And it's been reinvented through the years. And, you know, each time they do a good job of sort of like, you know, reinventing it. So there's the original one that sounds like very sort of British invasion. And then there's the one from the early 2000s that sort of gave it this like ska kind of feeling. So yeah, that's probably one of my top 5 probably.
Scooby-Doo is a cartoon that the success of it surprises me, because every time I think about Scooby-Doo, I'm like, there's no way this cartoon should be this popular, but it is.
I think it's got a little bit of everything. You know, it's got like the adventure, it's got like a personality type for every kid.
That's the thing, yeah.
And it's got like adventure, and it's got spookiness, and it's got humor. Like it's sort of, I think like if you're a fan of a bunch of different things, there's something for you to latch onto. You know, I love the mystery aspect of it when I was a kid. Like I like trying to figure out like who's behind the mask and all that kind of stuff. So, and some people like the comedy aspect. So I think it sort of has like this great, you know, almost like buffet of things for you to choose from. And all you have to do is find one. Like, you know, if you're a Velma girl, like, oh, Velma's for me, and I'm totally about this. If you like the comedy, oh, Shaggy and Scooby, that's for me. So I think that there's enough there that has like this tremendous appeal.
And of course, as people get older, Shaggy and Scooby are still funny for other reasons.
Yes, entirely.
Why are you closing the hero business?
Yeah, so the hero business is interesting because I developed like a new art style when I developed the comic, because I wanted to be kind of more in that animated style, you know, because I kind of saw it in my head as being like kind of a cartoon, or like I said, my inspiration was more sitcoms than it was comic books. So the whole inspiration was more of like the realm of classic sitcoms, workplace sitcoms like Cheers, plus a little weirdness like Futurama and Rick and Morty. It has like a little bit of those elements to it. So I wanted to develop like a style that would be that sort of animated looking style that it looks like it's a TV show. So once I developed that, people started to really respond to the art style as much or even more than the comic itself. So I started getting more work and interest in just my art, like the way I drew, than the property. So that led to just like more assignments and more things and some other opportunities here and there. So as much as I love the hero business, I've been doing it for 10 years, a little longer than 10 years. So it kind of felt like, okay, maybe it's time for something new. And as much as I love it, maybe it's time to sort of put a satisfying ending on a lot of these stories and characters and move on to some new things. So I've got a couple of new things in the works that I'm not quite ready to announce yet, but I'm excited about them. And I just can't do everything at once, right? So something had to give, and I'm looking at everything and I'm like, oh, hero business. Might have to take a break from you for a while. So closing things out for now, but maybe not saying goodbye forever. We'll see.
Well, you know, some people would have stayed with the hero business, you know, the comic forever, and then never get to an ending. That's
true. Yes, that's the other thing too. So I do think that there's also some power in ending things properly. You know, you look at some things and there's a lot of excitement in the beginning, and then you sort of realize that maybe the creators didn't quite know how to end it, or you know, put some satisfying caps on certain things. And I didn't want to be that. Like, I didn't want to be the person that just doesn't have time for hero business and it fades away and things never get resolved. And it just ends up being this website or something that just never got updated. So I thought, let me put work towards kind of closing out my own terms and making it like a love letter to people that have been following it for all these years and closing out all the storylines in ways that I halfway imagined when I started them.
So, Bill, with that, can you name 5 times that comics have closed out that you have greatly enjoyed?
It's funny you should ask that. It's almost like I prepared for this question beforehand because I got some props. So 5. So it was hard for me to limit them to 5. So I have a couple of consolation prize ones. So
Right.
First one is Mark Waid's finale to his Archie run, which I thought was fantastic. I really, really love this run. It's intrinsically Archie, but it's also super fresh and does a lot of fun things with the characters. But most importantly, after 32 issues, this finale, which is set at a school dance, which is again like a classic Archie scenario, something big happens, and the way it's resolved is something that only Archie Andrews can do. So I thought that was like a great way to close it out, and it's got like a nice little sweet thing from Mr. Weatherby at the very last page. So I love this run, but more importantly, I loved how everything got wrapped up.
I love that run too because I dismissed it for a long time because I looked at it and I'm like, I love Mark Waid and I love Fiona Staples, but I'm like, serious Archie? Nah. And then my brother gifted me the varsity edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this isn't serious at all. This is great.
Yep. But it's still humor. Like, it's still got a lot of humor in it. It's got a lot of the classic Archie elements, but it's got the teen drama.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Mark Waid, he's a comic aficionado for years and years. He did an amazing job of creating a synthesis between those two things. So yeah, loved it. But more importantly, it ended properly. Because a lot of classic comic runs, surprisingly, when you look at them, they don't end great. They just sort of peter off, or the creator gets in a fight with somebody and then somebody else takes over and it doesn't really kind of get the closure it needs. So for this one, for me, this one was great. X-Men, not Dark Phoenix Saga, but X-Men number 175 is one of my choices here. So this is the culmination of the Madeline Pryor saga, which I thought was like amazing, like edge of your seat stuff. And it's got, I guess, like a sort of happier ending than the Dark Phoenix saga. But the team comes together. It's sort of a nice it was intended to be the farewell to Cyclops in the comics, and then they brought back Jean Grey and everything changed. But great Paul Smith artwork, great emotional beats, a nice conclusion to really the Cyclops saga in many ways. But it's also very X-Men. It has all the X-Men traits of like the soap opera angles and the character development and all that kind of good stuff.
This is a little bit of trivia for people. Number one, this is the comic where everybody stopped liking Cyclops.
Yeah, well, was it when Jean came back, or was it this?
Oh yeah, it was when Jean came back. So this is basically
X Factor number 1, probably around there.
Goes in that direction.
For sure.
Also, Paul Smith, very underrated as an X-Men artist because a lot of people think that it was under John Byrne when the X-Men blew up, but it was really under Paul Smith. But it was uptrending when John Byrne was there, but it was really under Paul Smith when it was just consistently the best-selling comic.
Oh, is that right? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, John Byrne himself said so, and if John Byrne will take himself down a peg, it's true.
It's got to be true.
Yeah.
All right, so moving right along, my next choice is Alias number 28, which is the conclusion of the Jessica Jones Purple Man saga. And really, the entire series, this original Jessica Jones series, 1 through 28, is really kind of one big story. Mm-hmm. And this is the finale. This is like Jessica coming to terms with all her bad juju she's had to deal with in life and sort of making her peace with it. I think it's a great run. It's one of my favorite runs in comics, and this is a great finale. So those are my runner-ups, though. So I haven't even got to the good stuff. So top five Number 5 is Flash
Yes.
number 100. I only have the
Yes.
creative one, but yes. Flash number 100 is another Mark Waid, but this Flash run, his initial first like couple of years on Flash, is super excellent. We have the return of Barry Allen, which totally made Wally come of age. But more importantly, I picked Flash number 100 because it made it made Wally surpass Barry. So, and we didn't know what was going to happen. Like back in the day when this came out, was Wally going to die? Like we didn't even know if he was able to come back from the Speed Force. This introduced the Speed Force. It cemented his relationship with Linda Park. It made all the Flash family people kind of gather together in the midst of just freshly introducing Impulse, bringing in Max Mercury, bringing in Jesse Quick. It had so many elements going on, and number 100 was so satisfying. It also introduced the Speed Force Fed, and already mentioned that, which is a huge, huge element of the Flash lore. Emotionally satisfying, exciting, all the things. So that's my number 5 pick.
Do you remember the fan reaction to it when it was coming out? There was.
I remember just like the uncertainty, because it's like, the uncertainty of like, is Impulse going to be the new Flash? Because it was in the era where they were like killing people off and doing like shocking things. So there was a lot of excitement around what was exactly going to happen.
And of course, if they did it now, they'd actually replace Wally for like a month or so. I mean, a year or so.
They probably will.
And probably actually with Jesse. That's probably not a tease. That's probably not a tease now.
Yes.
But when it was coming out, some fans were saying, how can you introduce something like the Speed Force and say that nobody's ever gotten in and out of it and then have Wally escape it? That's just bad storytelling. I got news for those fans. When somebody says no one has ever gone in and out of the Cavern of Doom, it's usually the story of the person who goes in and out of the Cavern of Doom.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a classic storytelling thing. It's even talked about in the intro of one of the trade paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
They say the guy in the cave, exactly the example you just gave. So it wasn't like they knew exactly what they're doing. We're talking about like Mark Waid here. Like
Mark Waid here. And Mike Waringo was one of the artists.
Oh my gosh. How could I neglect to mention his excellent artwork throughout the storyline?
Yeah.
Yes.
Has Mark Waid's favorite Flash story too, which is when Wally goes back in time to talk to his younger self.
Oh yes, number 0.
Yeah, number 0. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's next, Bill?
So, okay, next one. Amazing Spider-Man number 200. So this might be one that's not well regarded as like one of the best storylines or whatever, but we're talking finales, right? So number 200, Spider-Man fights the burglar. Yes, that burglar, the burglar who killed Uncle Ben. So this brings everything full circle. It makes Peter Parker deal with the thing that made him become Spider-Man. And we've seen it a bunch of times where he's almost going to quit because of reasons, and he leaves his costume in the trash can again. And this is almost brings it all to a head. And the burglar, spoiler alert for a 40-year-old comic, he kidnaps Aunt May, and it comes to this big decision of, what's Peter going to do in this moment? And it's quintessentially Spider-Man. You could almost take the first 200 issues of Spider-Man and end with this, and it would be a very satisfying finale to the Spider-Man saga. So underrated, give it a look. Marv Wolfman, it's a good story.
Keith Pollard. I did binge the first 200 issues of Amazing Spider-Man.
You did?
Yeah. I think there are multiple points when you can consider it a done story. 33, which is the master planner.
Oh, master planner, okay.
Yeah, when he tells off Jonah at the end, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm done being your whipping boy. 33, graduation, because that's graduation. The death of Gwen.
Yes. Well, that's a very down one, yes.
Yeah, it sucks as an ending. And the end of the Clone Saga.
Oh yeah, actually the end of the Clone Saga is a good one. Because that, he comes to terms with his death of Gwen, and then MJ is kind of set up as being there for him. Like it's a big character turn for MJ as well.
Yeah.
The end of the Clone Saga is underrated. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's also like Jerry Conway's last.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the other one, is the marriage issue when he marries Mary Jane. You can kind of end there too.
It's okay.
You could.
Yeah.
That's a happy ending, you know.
The thing with 200, if you end there, you're around 10 issues away from starting Roger Stern's run.
I know.
And
Yes.
you can't end there, Bill.
You don't want
It's
to
too-
skip that.
You don't
But
wanna
I'm just
skip-
saying, as far we're talking finales, this could serve as a really nice
It's
finale.
good, yeah.
Okay, we still got
What's
3
next?
left. Still got 3 left. So the next one is Doom Patrol number 121. So classic Silver Age, and you know what happens in 121. Spoiler alert, they all die. So they basically sacrifice themselves to save this small fishing village.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, talk about a finale. Back then, you know, they played things kind of safe. So, okay, this team book's ending, and you kill them all off.
And
they
not
all
even to
died.
end the, not even to save the world. Not even to
No.
save the world. Yeah.
Just that small fishing village of like less than 50 people. There's not even a lot of people there. So super heroic, kind of epic thing. And it totally fit the format of the series. There are these freakish superheroes that nobody cares about that are, you know, doing it, you know, just to do the right thing because they got nothing else to do in life. And they end up making the ultimate sacrifice for this small group of people. And it's unheralded. It's not like the world comes and mourns their death. They're just gone. So I think it totally fit the tone of the series. It was a surprising development, and it was an emotional ending, but also a fitting one. So got to give it to Doom Patrol number 121.
What about number 2?
Number 2. This is no surprise to anyone that knows me. Tales of the Teen Titans annual number 3.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the conclusion of the whole Judas contract, the whole Terra saga. But in addition to closing out the Terra saga, we're introducing Nightwing, all these revelations about Deathstroke's past. It concludes the whole Deathstroke contract thing, which goes back to New Teen Titans number 2, almost the beginning of the series.
Yeah.
And it also completes Dick Grayson's arc from the very beginning of the series about being restless and trying to be out of Batman's shadow. He finally resolves all that in this storyline.
I
And then all the
consider
terror.
that the end myself. Like,
It
I
could
know
very
there's
well be
other
the end.
stuff, yeah, but I consider that
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's the trial of Deathstroke is good because it really puts a cap on all this kind of stuff. Because this is also another really it's a really downbeat ending if you end here. There's some other good stuff to come, but like as far as like being like a finale, I mean, this is really powerful.
Yeah.
It's an awesome comic book, so you can't argue that.
Also, it has one of those things where Terra's just insane, right? Like every other storyline back then would have given her something redemptive, but she's just insane.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, and since then, I mean, they brought her back in comics.
Yeah,
she comes back like several times in different ways because continuity. And every time she comes back, like she's sympathetic or she's got a redemption thing. And the point of this was that, like, no, she's irredeemable. That's the tragedy of it.
Yeah, and in the Teen Titans cartoon, they make her redeemable, right?
Yeah, and actually, I really enjoyed the Teen Titans cartoon version of this story for what they were doing. It made a lot of sense, but it's not this. Like, it's something different.
Yeah, I noticed in all of those things that you mentioned about milestones in this issue, you did not mention the first appearance of Jericho.
Yes, it is also the first appearance of Jericho. Well, so this serves. So I do think, though, like as dark as this was, Jericho was the light, right? Yeah. So if like if the tragedy is Terra being irredeemable, you have the light of Jericho joining the team and being this very positive character that now is part of the mix.
Right?
So,
isn't it crazy that Nightwing's first appearance, he shares that page with Jericho?
It just shows you, like, there wasn't a vision for these things being examined for the ages. It's like, Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing should have totally been a full page moment.
Yeah, so. It's funny because you're like, Jericho, it's either they didn't think Nightwing was going to be that big or they thought Jericho was going to be that big. One or the other.
Yeah, and you can't even take the half a panel and isolate it. Because he's also saying, Jericho, what are you doing in that costume? Joey, what are you doing in that costume? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's like no getting out of that. He's sharing this moment with the mutton chopped blonde afro sensation that we know as Jericho.
And what is the final finale?
Final finale. I went with a classic. I don't even know if you could beat this one. It is Whatever Happens to Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore, which closes out basically the entire pre-crisis Superman. It gives moments to every single character in the Superman mythos. It's super satisfying. It might bring a tear to your eye. It's super great. It deserves its accolades, and I couldn't think of a single thing to beat that as far as a finale.
If the crypto scene doesn't pull on
Come on,
people's hearttstrings, come on,
you've
guys.
got no heart. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, talk about finales. This wasn't just a finale to a run or a series. This is a finale to what, the first 50 years of Superman almost. I mean, we're talking, and it did it justice. So that's my top finale.
All Alan Moore ever wanted to do in superheroes ever was write Superman. Why DC
right?
never gave him, an extended run on Superman is beyond me. Can you imagine in the 80s if they'd given him and like Dave Gibbons Superman, and then they gave Frank Miller Batman for an extended run?
That would have been nuts.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh well. And let's talk about something else, Bill. So you got your you've got the hero business. These people are doing it for money. They're not exactly doing it for altruistic reasons. What are some of examples of superheroes doing things for money? Or
Yeah. So, I fully admit like the hero business is not a super original concept in terms of profiting off super heroics. That's been done a few times before or addressed in different ways.
The agency part is original though.
The agency part is the new angle on it.
Yeah.
And it's also more focusing on the workplace element of it, not the superhero element of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think a lot of times when the initial idea is to make a hero who's in it for the money, the arc is always, oh no, he's going to learn not to be in it for the money and do it for the good of mankind. But I kind of think, being kind of real, as much as you're down for saving the world, you're going to be down for making a couple million for, some movie deals or something.
Yeah.
So you can kind of be both. I mean, look at celebrity culture. Even people that are super generous, they will also, want to make some money.
Yeah, they'll take their endorsements.
For sure. Yes. I mean, look at any celebrity. They're going to take endorsements.
Yeah.
So that's my angle for my comic for sure. But there's been some fun elements in comics where, heroes did it for the dollar. One of the most fun ones I can remember is when Spider-Man first joined the Avengers. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It was in Avengers number 236. So this was like in the 80s.
Yeah.
And what made him want to join the Avengers is that he heard, oh, you get paid? You get $1,000 a week to be an Avenger? I never knew that. So of course, Peter Parker's down with this because he's like, I'm always struggling for money, and that sounds pretty cool to me. And it's a one-issue thing, and basically by the end of the issue, he's like, yeah, I'm not a team player, so I'm going to go and be poor again, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's a fun comic.
Yeah, that's why he wanted to join the Fantastic Four. Early on.
That's right. I'd forgotten that. They probably mentioned that in that issue. I haven't read it in a while.
Yeah. And that is actually one of the reasons that he did eventually join, right? Like he ends up getting a place in Avengers Tower.
That's during the Bendis run. I don't remember if they talk money. I can't remember that exactly. But maybe you're right. I haven't read it in a while. So
I think they talk about his financial stability and he hugs Tony Stark.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Now that you say that, I do think I remember that.
Yeah. That's actually what I thought you were referring to when you messaged me that.
No, I wanted to go to the more obscure one because I figured people probably knew the more recent one.
What's next?
So next is Golden Eagle of the Teen Titans.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with this guy?
Yeah.
Okay. So the fun thing was he originally showed up. He was like a generic sidekick to Hawkman. He's got the wings, and when he showed up during the original debut of Titans West in Teen Titans number, I think like 47, 48 of the original series, some 49, I think it is 49. They played that he was like this slacker that couldn't hold down a job. Like he was always like working at a gas station and getting fired, and working at a diner and getting fired. And when they rebooted all the characters post-Crisis, the angle on him, they kept the slacker thing, but the other angle they added was that he charges for services. So when he goes and like rescues a cat out of a tree, he's like, that'll be $5. Like, so that was kind of their angle on him, because he couldn't hold down a job. So he's like, hey, maybe I can make some money here and there doing like odd superhero jobs. So he was this really like low rate superhero that tried to make a buck doing things. I thought that was a great angle for a character. I thought like he could have carried his own series doing that. And they played it as a joke. Like it was always kind of like that was a joke.
Of course.
And they kicked him off and brought him back as a CEO and blah, blah, blah. But I thought it was like the most interesting as this sort of like slacker, kind of loser California dude trying to charge people $5 to rescue their cats. I kind of think somebody should revive that version of him.
Did he charge them before or after he did the thing?
I think he tried to be upfront about it, but in his Who's Who entry, I think the people were surprised that they got a bill. Because the Who's Who kind of describes his whole deal.
Because that really sucks if like, you know, he helped you and then he billed you and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, and then he puts the cat back in the tree. Like, you don't have $5, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to call Superman and maybe wait. Don't got a signal watch? Pay the $5.
Which one is next?
Okay, so next up is of course Damage Control. You know,
Of
Damage
course.
Control is you know, I'm surprised that hasn't been made into a movie or a TV show from Marvel Cinematic Universe.
They do
They
get
appear-
mentioned in Homecoming though.
I was gonna say yes,
Yeah.
they are mentioned in Homecoming, and one of the characters played by Tyne Daly appears. She is a character from the Damage Control comic, so she does show up. So they are in universe, but I mean, they could carry their own show or their own movie. Totally make it a comedy. You know, basically the premise of Damage Control is that they clean up after all the superhero fights in New York City. So they basically do clean up, and they get paid by the city to do that. It's a great angle for a comic, you know, created by the late great Dwayne McDuffie. So
I was gonna say, yeah.
check it out. It's available in trade. Super fun and worth a look.
The late great Dwayne McDuffie, by the way, still like no matter how much he gets talked about, still underrated.
Still underrated. Still underrated.
Absolutely. What's next?
Yeah. So this is also like maybe a lesser known one, but I want to give this series some props because it's awesome. From Avengers Academy, character Stryker, who had electrical powers. His whole angle was he was trying to get endorsements in the spotlight, and he was like a childhood star. His mother kind of pushed him into it. She's like one of those stage moms. And his whole goal of trying to be a superhero, though, was to make money off it by being a celebrity. And they've got some interesting story ideas throughout the run of Avengers Academy, which only lasted 39 issues, but it's super excellent. And if you haven't checked out Avengers Academy, I suggest you do. Stryker's a really cool character. There's some surprising elements to his character that I won't give away right here, but super solid series, great characterization. They do some fun things with Stryker. I think he should pop up more. I haven't seen him around in a while. So that's my number 4 choice.
Art by Mike McKone, if I remember it.
Mike McKone,
Yeah.
I think, and Tom Grummett share art duties
Tom
after a
Grummett.
while. They go back and forth, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the art's great. Written by Christos Gage.
Christos Gage.
Yep. It's
Yeah.
an excellent series. If you're a fan of stuff like, you know, Teen Titans and Young Avengers and New Warriors, definitely check it out.
Absolutely. What's the last one?
I mean, who haven't I mentioned so far?
The King,
Corporate, like Booster Gold.
of course.
So I love the original version of Booster Gold, who was clearly in it for the money. And he goes through like, you know, character growth and is less in it for the money. And I like the earlier Booster, who's just trying to get paid. You know, it's a great series. And again, that first it's only 24 or 25 issues, the original series.
Yeah, Dan Jurgens.
Dan Jurgens wrote and drew it. Since then, they brought him back, and he's kind of really goofy, or they play the time travel angle that he's out to save the world, and he's just pretending to be goofy so he can save the world in secret. But I've always liked the whole element of him just being in it for the money, just trying to make a buck.
It's true. And he never really grows out of that completely either.
Yes, thankfully he does not. There's always an element of that. When he founded the group called the Conglomerate, which was a version of them trying to make money off superheroics during the Justice League International era. They came back as formerly known as the Justice League.
Yeah.
And didn't they have like a basically a Heroes for Hire situation with like Mary Marvel and those guys, that limited series?
Yep.
So it does come back. Like and him and Beetle have their schemes to make money, like the island Kui 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 and stuff like that. So yeah, it definitely does show up. It's definitely part of his character. But I like it when it's front and center, I guess. Right? Like I like it when it's like driving plots.
Isn't formerly known also when we find out that he married a sugar mama for money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's so fun. And then he's like, oh my God, get me away from her. I can't stand it.
It's our booster. Yeah.
Booster Gold.
And there's some more too. Heroes for Hire, Power Man and Iron Fist, they were hiring out their, skills and sort of
that's
PI basis.
That one's a classic. It actually reminds me of it's not like Danny Rand needs the money, but
right, yeah.
It reminds me of Angel. Right? Angel Investigations, because the whole argument that they give that the reason he charges is so nobody feels like a sense of obligation to him after he saves them. That's actually a really powerful argument.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah,
it's a good one.
Even there's other PI heroes. There's Jessica Jones is also a PI.
Yeah.
And you had Hero Hotline, which is a limited series from the 80s, where they were trying to also like make a buck, and like you called them if you needed help and they charged you.
I have not heard of that one.
Yep. So there's a few floating around. I'm probably forgetting some. Like those were the ones that kind of, I'm just like, let me write down the top 5 I could think of for, sort of conversation with you. And those are the ones that I came up with.
One of my favorite angles, like lately, I mean, it's not a superhero, it's a super villain. You know what Dan Slott did to the Hobgoblin? Where he had Roderick Kingsley basically franchise out these villain identities. Yes. Thought that was really clever.
Yeah, that was good. That was a clever angle. And also there was the Power Company in the 90s.
Oh yeah, Kurt Busiek.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was there's some sort of financial thing going on with that. So yeah, it pops up once in a while.
They were backed by a guy named something Power.
Hosea
Power. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So you're talking about the hero business and the doors it's opened for you, because I know you mentioned before that the artist you wanted to be was George Perez.
Yes, when I was a kid. Yes,
when you were a kid, and you told me to go back to your Deviant Art and go back, and I did. And when did you decide to change the style? Was it with hero business, or did you start exploring that style and then come up with hero business?
I think I had a little bit of an artist identity crisis pre-hero business. So I would dip into things like, I couldn't do the George Perez thing, but I would find other artists that I liked and try to develop my own style. And then came like Mark Waringo and Joe Madura, who had more of that sort of like, they had more of a cartoony style. And that always appealed to me. So I would look at them for some inspiration. And then, like I said, like, hero business is a weird thing because I think what happened was I was inspired by the rise of webcomics in the early 2000s. And I'd been in the marketing world at that point. So I kind of said goodbye to illustration, kind of. I kind of just drew for fun a little bit here and there. But then when this webcomics thing happened, I'm like, oh, that's an easy way to just kind of make comics and put them out there. And I don't have to pay for printing. I could just post them and get, feedback or whatever. And then I'm like, I should develop an idea. And I went through several ideas. And, at one time it was like, oh, should it be superheroes on a reality show or superheroes? I had an idea that these superpowered people were in house arrests, all in one place, like a Hall of Justice type place, but they were in house arrest, so they had to live together. And one was like a Martha Stewart type crime, like insider trading. So she was just like this rich prima donna superhero that got caught, and she had to then be housed with like a supervillain, like Dr. Malefactor, like a Lex Luthor type. And then I'm like, that's kind of complicated to figure out what they'd be in jail for and all that kind of stuff. And then I just thought of the agency animal. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So once I did that, I'm like, okay, so how do I make this happen? And I was originally going to hire an artist to draw it and just write it. So I'm like, I don't have time to draw this, and I don't know what my art style is, and I don't know. I just was having this crisis. So I'm like, okay, how can I make this work? And I'm like, let me look at my art. Let me look at what I want to draw. Let me look at what I want to do. And going back to our earlier part of the conversation, I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of like a sitcom. It kind of feels like something you'd see on TV. So why don't I make it more of like a cartoony look? So I look back and I'm like, okay, let me really simplify all my lines. Let me go back and think about like what kind of cartoon looks I like. And generally what I looked at the most was Bruce Timm, who is just so economical with his lines and of course, inspired a generation of artists. And I also looked at Dan DiCarlo, the old Archie artist.
Of course.
Who's a huge influence of mine. And I always loved him since I was a kid. Like when I was a little kid, like I knew the Dan DiCarlo Archie. I was able to pick him out, like without even looking at the signature. It was like one of the earliest artists I was able to identify. So looking at those two artists, I sort of melded them kind of, but then of course you always add your own stuff to it. And then from there, like my style started to emerge. If you look at my early hero business stuff, it's rough. Like I still haven't figured out a lot of stuff. When I did the first trade collection, I actually, I remastered the first storyline because it was too rough compared to even the second issue.
Really?
Yeah, it's super rough. I can dig some up and I'll share them with you, but it looks very different. Like when you look at an artist's first work in a comic and it sort of looks like them, but it looks nothing like them. But you can sort of see the seeds of them in it. It's like that.
You ever see the first Peanuts? The first few years of Peanuts?
Yeah.
Looks completely different.
Even the first Peanuts though, like there's a craft there. They look different, but the craft is super solid.
It is. But it's weird because you're seeing Snoopy's doghouse as like a 3/4 angle, which you'll never see again once he finds his style, right?
Right. Yeah. But like I guess I mean like, when you see an artist, like what their original portfolio looked like or what their very first published work is, and it will be some inventory story for like Marvel Comics Presents or something. And you sort of see, you could see where their work took them, but it's still like rough, like it's rough around the edges. So, I mean, it happened quickly though. This is why, sometimes artists will approach me at a show and they'll be like, I need some advice, whatever. And it sounds cliche, whatever, but it's like, my biggest advice is just to draw, is just to do it, because you learn by doing. And you figure things out when you're challenged. I remember somebody showing me some work they were developing, and the characters, all their hands were hidden. They were like this, or they were like this. And I said, okay, I'm like, you don't like to draw hands. I was like, oh yeah, they're hard. I'm like, you gotta draw them. Like there's no way around it. People are using their hands constantly. It's acting. Like it's all over artwork. Like you got to get over it. You got to figure out a way to draw those hands. So learning by doing, you just figure things out. And it's like it's like a magician with tricks or something. Like once you learn a trick, you know that trick forever. You know that coin trick behind the ear. Well, I
Yeah.
learned a new trick with the rabbit. Now I know that trick. I can do it in my sleep. Oh, this card trick. I can flip cards now. So like once you know those tricks, you start putting them together. So it's like, oh, now I know how to draw a fist. Now I know how to draw a hand when people are excited. Now I know how to draw a hand when they're pointing. And you amass those skills and you just keep replicating them over and over again. And then sometimes you need a certain angle and you're like, okay, now I have to research this one because I don't know off the top of my head. And then you learn a new one. You're like, oh, now I know how that works. Like how thumb looks like that, So it's all a process, I guess.
Yeah.
Fun.
I've heard that the two hardest things to draw are the hands and the second eye.
Yeah. There's little tricks to that too. So like if you're drawing a physical thing, if you draw a face or the second eye or whatever, you flip the page upside down and you make sure it's symmetrical because your eye plays tricks on you, and you're looking at something and it looks straight and then you look at it like upside down and it doesn't look straight anymore. So it helps you like sort of self-correct sometimes.
It's interesting. I didn't know that trick.
Yeah.
Walt Simonson told me that sometimes he gets to a point where he feels like he can't draw, and then he realizes it's because his knowledge of art grows, but his skill hasn't caught up yet. And then it catches up, and then he feels like he can draw again, and then the cycle repeats.
Oh,
That ever happened? That ever happened to you?
Yeah, I guess I look at it a different way. The way I look at things is like when you're getting stuck on something, and I apply this to writing too. When you're getting stuck on something, jump ahead to the next thing and just figure that out. And then go back to that thing when you're ready to. So it works when you're breaking story, because sometimes you get stuck and you're like, I don't know why that character would go to this person's house. There's no reason for them to be there. I don't know how to make that work without it being completely artificial. I'm like, okay, you know what? I can't, I thought of 5 reasons and I can't solve it. So I'm just going to put them at their doorstep. They're going to be at their house and the scene's going to start. I'm going to just keep going. And then sometimes as you get further on, like 3 scenes later, you're like, oh, that's why they're there. And you figure it out. Like it becomes self-evident in some weird way. And you're like, oh, that's how I get them there. That makes total sense. Because that character would have told them because now they're there or whatever. Same thing with art. It's like I'm getting stuck on this whatever coffee shop scene, whatever. And it's like I can't figure out this angle. I can't figure out, And then you just keep going and you go to your safety spots of what you know how to draw that you've drawn a bunch of times. And then you sometimes just have to go back to that. You just have to go back with a fresh head and look at it again and be like, okay, like now I can sort of have a fresh idea of how to look at this. I'm a firm believer, like I think our brain is always processing things in the background like a computer. So once you know the problem exists, your brain is already starting to work on it. And even though like your front loading programming is working on something other task, your background programming is still trying to solve that thing.
Yeah.
And it'll become evident. And sometimes you need to sleep on it. Sometimes you just need to give it an hour. Sometimes it takes a couple of days, but it suddenly like reveals itself like a gift to you and it falls into your lap. Oh.
I get it. I have 3 last questions, but they'll be quick. You talked about the doors is open to you. I know you can't talk about what hasn't happened yet, but I know what has happened since the last time we talked. You started doing covers for Archie, which is congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Which one of those covers that you've drawn has been your favorite so far?
My favorite has got to be the anniversary cover that I did a riff on the Marvel 25th anniversary covers from the 80s. But I secretly chose that because the retailer I'm partnering with, he likes to do homage covers. But I'm like, I want to draw all the Archie characters. I want to draw as many as I can. So that was my secret way to be like, oh, let me do this version, my version of this cover, because then I get to draw everybody. So I got to draw like Cheryl Blossom and Mr. Weatherby and Hot Dog and Josie and Sabrina, like all those guys. That's definitely my favorite.
And of course, the funny thing about that cover is like every single time you do something like that, people will come out and say, "Where's this person? Where's that person?"
Oh, totally. Yes.
I think I did it to you.
Yeah. My secret answer to that.
Which is?
My secret answer to that is like I'll always say something like, oh, they're to the right of hot dog, but to the right of hot dog would be like off the page.
It's off the page. Yeah.
But they're right there.
It's such a
Or they're
great,
behind the tree.
it's such a great cover.
But but yeah, I mean, because the real answer is, look, it's like for that cover especially, I drew my favorites pretty much. I drew what I consider to be quintessential Riverdale. And I didn't want to leave anybody out. I actually went to the Archie fan boards, and I'm like, I have 3 slots left, and I'm not sure who to put in there. So who you got? Who you voting for? Tell me. And we figured it out.
Yeah. So where's Professor Flute Snoot? No, I'm kidding. So-
Yes. Well, it's funny because like I didn't want to go too far with the adults, because once you open up that box, then you got to put in all the parents and
Yeah.
And somebody like Mr. Lodge is actually featured in stories more than any other parents. But having Mr. Lodge and then not Archie's mom and dad felt weird. So I pretty much just like, it's Miss Grundy, Mr. Weatherby, and then Pop Tate.
And
like
Pop
they're
Tate.
really the ones that are involved in the teenage storyline. So
So this is actually one of your stretch goals, the Archie variant covers.
not a stretch goal yet. I haven't put together my stretch goals because, to be honest, I got funded quickly. Like I wasn't intended. I didn't think.
Oh, you weren't ready.
So quickly, so I wasn't ready. I have some ideas. I definitely know a couple that I'm doing. I just have to put together the graphics for it. So stay tuned on that. Definitely next week I'll be announcing those.
I used the term wrong. It's not stretch goals. This is one of your rewards when you pledge.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I have a Riverdale Division Award, which has all 3 variant covers, or you can also do it as an add-on. So if you just want one of the covers, you can do that as an add-on when you pledge.
You also have the Vampyverse division.
Yeah, so that's super fun.
That's another one that's another door that got opened for you.
Yeah, so that was cool too. So yeah, so I was looking at the opportunity to do things with other companies, and was approached with this idea of doing like a take on the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse movie. So put that together, and yay! Now we got some vampy art. So awesome.
Doing Vampirella in the style of Into the Spider-Verse is not something I would have thought of doing ever.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. The hardest thing is like she's kind of mimicking the pose that Miles Morales has on those promotional posters, and it's not a classic vampy pose. Like she's usually in some kind of sexy pose or something like that.
Yeah,
so it's a little different, but I think it totally works. It was fun drawing the variants. I really like drawing the cave vampy and the film noir vampy. Those were fun.
I think it works in your style, with her in the Miles Morales pose, because if you'd worked in a more realistic style, I don't think anatomically it would work.
Yeah, you got to give it that exaggerated kind of animated look to it for it to play well.
For that to work, right? And what other rewards you got here? So you can get the PDFs, you can get just the sign, you got the mug, you got the swag bag, which has just about everything.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of stuff.
And
got commissions. You can get
commissions.
Got the Hero Head sketch covers, so that's a way to get like a quick head sketch from me at a pretty affordable pledge level. So
for everyone who wants to back this book, I'll put links down below. So it's Kickstarter, and just go to Hero Business Final Reports. Here's my last question, Bill. Is there a better ending song to anything in the world than Semisonic's Closing Time?
There really isn't. And it's funny, when I was crafting my sort of farewell announcement to the Hero business, I'm like, how do I start? Like, it just feels like it's too much, and it's 10 years and all. And then I just thought of that Closing Time by Semisonic, and I'm like, that's it. That's my intro letter to my fond farewell.
I'll tell you a funny story. When you came up with it, I had just gotten off a phone call with some friends and we were talking about that specific song. Cause when I went to school in the States, there was one bar where I was at, Fred. And the band would always sing closing time to close the bar. Always, every night. And I'm like, all right, this is just the perfect song. And then one of the people in the call, her family runs a small mall here. And then she said, we play that song when it's time to close every night to this day. It's like there is no better song than the next day I see your.
Yeah, and the cynical marketing person in me wonders sometimes if bands come up with songs just so that they get that kind of play. Hey, if we come up with closing time, I bet you every bar in the United States is always going to play that when they want to kick people out. But that's me being cynical. You might not know this trivia, so I'm gonna close this with this big trivia bomb. I don't know if I believe it, but I'm gonna say it that the lead singer of Semisonic swears that closing time is not about closing time; it's about the birth of his child.
I've heard that, and I don't buy it.
I don't believe it. I'm glad you said that because I didn't want to be the lone cynical person here. But y'all can Google it and judge for yourself. But it's a little suspect.
It's like Paul McCartney being adamant that Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is about a girl named Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
Nothing to do with Elvis.
It's like, no, Paul, we know what you're doing.
Yeah, and there's nothing in those Scooby snacks.
There's nothing in those Scooby snacks at all. Way to bring it full circle. Thank you, Bill. This was great.
Thank you. All right. Great talking to you as always, too.